A former Baltimore Ravens offensive lineman called out Lamar Jackson about how he's been approaching his game recently. We talk about that. More details on the Deontay Johnson situation, particularly in the locker room. All that and more coming up next here on Locked On Ravens.
You are Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into another edition of Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. I'm your host, Kevin IceShaker of Ravens Wire, and of course, we are here with you on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you so much for being here, making Locked On Ravens both a part of your day and your first listen each and every single day, free and available all podcasting platforms, including in video form on YouTube, where you can like and subscribe to the channel, also in audio form where you can follow along and subscribe over there as well. Same show, both audio and video. We bring you 5 days a week plus more of daily Ravens coverage. Today's Friday edition of Locked On Ravens is brought to you by FanDuel. You can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet. You're going to start with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Purple Friday is here, which means Sam Njoku, Ravens Talk Podcast, is back with us. Sam, again, wish we were talking under better circumstances. Ravens lose. There's all this internal drama with the team now, and now it's, very public. Usually the Ravens like to keep that close to the vest, and now it is out there for the whole NFL world to see. I know we were talking about how when the schedule dropped, man, that bye week is pretty late. They're going to have to go through all this physical football. Now it feels like it might be the best thing to happen to them because they needed a reset.
Oh, yeah. I was thinking that after the game, this has not been a better bye week to come for the Ravens in quite some time. This is a very great opportunity for this team to reset both culture-wise and football sense and, get some players reset to get ready for the long stretch, hopefully, for the Ravens as the postseason approaches.
Yeah, you got 4 games left, and hopefully they can make the most of that because despite the loss to Philadelphia and them again losing ground on Pittsburgh, there was still a decent chance that they can make a run at this division, especially when you compare Baltimore's schedule with Pittsburgh's schedule side by side. Pittsburgh has a gauntlet to go. Baltimore has some opportunities to hopefully beat up on some bad teams, but we do know, Sam, sometimes the Ravens like to play down to their competition, which might not bode well in some circumstances. But again, the bye week will give an opportunity for the Ravens to go out there, figure out what's going on, and hopefully just get them back on the right track and on the same page with each other. But there's been some conversations recently about Lamar Jackson. Obviously, he's having another MVP-type season. He's been incredible for most of the year. He struggled against Pittsburgh, didn't have his best game against Philadelphia either. But I think the conversation coming out of that Philly game, Sam, has been the way that Lamar Jackson has used his legs throughout the season, where obviously this is a different offense than what we've seen under Greg Roman. It's two different things when you compare Todd Monken versus Greg Roman, what Lamar Jackson does in that offense, and honestly, what's being asked of Lamar Jackson in that offense. So we're seeing less designed runs. We're seeing less scramble drills from Lamar, and he's made an emphasis on pushing the ball down the field and letting routes develop. But sometimes that's resulted in him not necessarily taking what's in front of him when there's green grass available. And a former Ravens offensive lineman in A.Q. Shipley called out Lamar, pulled 3 clips from that Philly game, but said that there were 20 more he could have used as an example of Lamar not taking those opportunities. And he said, just run, use your strength, you're electrifying, and mentioned, there was a big run against Cleveland a couple of years ago. He's obviously had those draw plays up the middle. Again, he did like a whole NFC East tour with those. But what's kind of your take on this, Sam? Because obviously Lamar's been incredible as a passer this season, and letting those routes develop obviously has been a big evolution in his game instead of just automatically taking off and running. But there is a balance between passing and rushing, especially when Lamar's arm and his legs are such individual great weapons.
Yeah, I kind of agree with it, but you also have to understand Lamar Jackson, for all intents and purposes, loves the system he's in. He is the guy who's going to sit back in the pocket, and he wants to take his reads. He wants to progress through his reads before making the decision to run with the football. If a guy like Lamar Jackson is going to get an opportunity to run and use that green grass in front of him, especially in situations like he had in Philadelphia, he has to skip a couple of reads, and I don't think he's the type of guy who wants to do that. I understand the situation at hand, and this is dating back to the AFC Championship game where he was not taking those chances with his legs. So I think this bye week will be a great chance for him to reassess what he wants to do, because this isn't going to stop. There are going to be defenses coming up that are going to try and mimic what they saw against the Broncos, against the Eagles, against the Steelers, and pretty much daring him to use his legs in those situations. That Eagles game, I was at the game. Definitely he should have been using his legs a little bit more because that offensive line got punished, and he didn't have time to step in the pocket and make those throws. In fact, you saw a lot of times he was taking 10-step drops because of that pass rush. So in those instances, you'd rather have him use his legs to make those plays. So I think the criticism is warranted in a way, but I also think people need to understand Lamar Jackson's a quarterback first. He wants his receivers to get those plays, those runs that you're talking about. He's not going for 60 yards each play. He knows that the best way to move the ball down the field is to pass the football, and he's going to try and take that approach. But to your point and to AQ Shipley's point, he's going to have to make those plays with his legs because as the season winds down and these teams get tougher on defense, he's going to have to try and use every arsenal at his disposal to get these wins.
Yeah, and I think that part of it too is almost where he has been, again, as you mentioned, Sam, very vocal about, hey, I want to throw this football. I'm going to make things happen with my arm. And he's been great at doing that over the course of his career. But when Lamar doesn't take the grass available when it's there, when it's clearly there, sometimes there's a split-second decision that happens and throw versus run doesn't matter as much in those situations because, maybe you're only getting 5 yards regardless of what you choose. But when there's a clear opportunity and you don't use your legs, you're essentially letting the defense off of the hook. But I just feel like Lamar Jackson, especially nationally, has been so vilified for having the rushing ability when in reality, it's such a strength. I mean, that's what makes Lamar Jackson, his incredible ability with his arm and his incredible ability with his legs. And I think that, again, offensively, it's just different where they're not running, RPOs the entire game like we saw early in his career. I mean, he's obviously evolved far past that, and so is the offense and the system that he's been in. But I'm glad you mentioned the point about the offensive line as well, because definitely was not great on Sunday against Philadelphia, and those tougher, more physical defensive fronts have given Baltimore's offensive front a lot of fits over the course of the season. Philly, Pittsburgh, Kansas City, those types of teams. But then you have Buffalo or Tampa or Denver. Those guys don't have that physical front. Lamar Jackson can sit back there, make decisions, roll out in the pocket. But we've seen even plays where he'll float out and get out into space and just kind of float, make sure guys can develop, work back to him, which has been an evolution in his game. But do you feel like, Sam, it's even situational where even in these games where Lamar has to come back or things aren't going well, do you think that he maybe gets in his own head a little bit and is like, man, well, we really have to pick up chunk yards. I'm going to try to air this thing out 20-plus yards down the field instead of picking up 9 yards with my legs. Do you think he's trying to get more of it back as opposed to maybe picking up the shorter chunk games with his legs that maybe he'd be more privy to picking up earlier in the game when there's not as much, oh, man, we really have to make this ground up here?
I think there's some validity to that because, one, the Ravens did something that I've been screaming for, and they've done very well the past 2 weeks, and that's run the football. And then because they are very interested in using the run game to set up their offense, there's limited opportunities for Lamar Jackson to get it done with his arm. So I think he does use those opportunities and know that those opportunities are going to be limited, especially in close games like the one we saw in Philly, at least through the first 3 quarters. So Lamar Jackson is going to be that guy to try and make those chunk yards with his arm. So I think the Ravens need to take their approach, especially during this bye week, to be honest with Lamar Jackson, be honest with his team. When we face tough defensive fronts like Philly, like Kansas City, like Pittsburgh, we need to understand that, Lamar, you need to be able to go 1 read, 2 read maybe, and then go, especially if the green grass is in front of you, because these defenses are going to sit back and dare you to do it. And so far in Lamar Jackson's career, at least the last 2 seasons, he hasn't been able to do that or hasn't been willing to do that. So I think that approach will serve him well. You mentioned it, Buffalo doesn't have the defensive front that maybe desired. The Texans, also a defense that really doesn't have that defensive front to be desired. So there are only really 2 defenses in the AFC with Pittsburgh and Kansas City that gives Lamar Jackson problems, especially with that, well, I said the offensive line problems. So I think in those 2 instances, the game script has to be, Lamar, do not be afraid to run the football. But in all other instances, I think Lamar Jackson is doing exactly what he's been doing, and that's why he's, in my opinion, the front runner to win the MVP. Even though Saquon Barkley and Josh Allen have picked up steam, I think he's still the guy to win it. So I think Lamar, continue to do what you do, but don't be afraid to use your assets, as you mentioned, run the football.
Yeah, and again, I don't think Lamar is wrong for letting routes develop and allowing his receivers to get open, work his receivers open, and do all that good stuff. Like, that is a good part of Lamar's game. I think he's become really good at it, and it's part of what makes Lamar Jackson Lamar Jackson. But what also makes Lamar Jackson, as we mentioned, is his ability with his legs. And so it's just, even if it's keeping the defense on their toes, and it's not as clear as, oh, there's 20 yards of green grass in front of you, he's going to get 20 yards. Obviously, guys will come up, and maybe it's a gain of 9 or 8 because guys are coming up trying to stop Lamar. But it's the ability to say, hey, we don't have to worry about Lamar right now with his legs if he's rolling out, because he's going to make his receivers work and get back, and he's going to throw the ball. You want to keep defenses on their toes to say, oh, wait, do we want to spy him, or do we want to put a guy out there to kind of mirror what Lamar's doing? It doesn't feel like defenses have that in the back of their minds right now, which I feel like is hurting Baltimore's offense. But again, we know, Sam, Lamar can hurt any defense in so many different ways. And I think we also know that we could see a different Lamar Jackson coming out of the bye week, especially with what we heard during his press conference. I mean, he was very animated. You know, he's a competitive person. He was very frustrated, it feels like, with how the game went, obviously revealed. And this is part of the conversation too, that his mom cussed him out, said that, hey, you need to take those rushing lanes. And Todd Monken ended up saying during his availability, hey, mom knows best. And so maybe we'll see some of that. Do you think we will see an increase in maybe rushing attempts, scramble drills, or just overall designed runs from Lamar Jackson coming out of the bye week?
I think so. I think this was a wake-up call for them. I think this was very reminiscent of the AFC Championship game. I was at the game, and I told anybody that was within earshot, this is going to be the wake-up call, because he realizes this feels eerily similar. I mean, even the atmosphere at that game was eerily similar to the AFC Championship game. The Ravens left a lot of points on the board. Some of that is with Justin Tucker, which I'm sure we'll talk about, and a lot of that is because the offense stalled in pivotal moments. And I think that this will be the wake-up call that the Ravens need to say, okay, we need to use all of our weapons, every arsenal available to us, and that includes Lamar Jackson's legs to get the job done. So I think moving forward, you'll see a more dynamic Lamar Jackson. What that means for the offense as a whole remains to be seen, but I know moving forward, you won't see a Lamar Jackson that's, slow to run the football. I think you'll see a guy who's rushing it a little bit more to give his offensive team the opportunity to get points.
Yeah, and I think that's something that a lot of people are hoping to see, and it feels like, based off Lamar's comments, we are probably going to see that heading out of their bye week. But coming up in the second part of the show, there's been a lot of drama surrounding this Ravens team. Obviously, it's been covered left, right, and center from everybody from a Baltimore perspective, and some locker room details have spilled out about the Diontae Johnson situation. So be sure to stay tuned. We'll talk about everything with that and a lot more coming up on Locked On Ravens. First, the show is brought to you by Omaha Steaks. Nothing delivers comfort and joy quite like the unrivaled quality and taste of Omaha Steaks. It's guaranteed perfection in every single bite, and right now you can save on unforgettable gifts with 50% off site-wide at omahasteaks.com. Plus, score an extra $30 off with promo code NFL. With 5 generations of experience, they consistently deliver the world's best steak experience, and the gifting experts at Omaha Steaks have made it easy to deliver the perfect gift with thoroughly curated gift packages featuring gourmet favorites, from legendary steaks to mouth-watering desserts and more. Save 50% off site-wide for a limited time at omahasteaks.com. Plus, our listeners can get an extra $30 off with promo code NFL. That's 50% off at omahasteaks.com and an extra $30 off with promo code NFL. Minimum purchase may apply. And the show is brought to you by Skylight Frames. For me, I come from a big family, and sometimes it can be hard and expensive to buy each person a personalized gift for the holidays, but we got the perfect gift for you. Skylight Frame is the touchscreen digital photo frame your whole family will love. Upload thousands of photos with your phone and watch them appear in seconds. It's so easy to use. Setup takes less than 60 seconds. Plus, there's seamless sharing. You can invite friends and family to easily share photos via the free Skylight mobile app or email. No account or subscription required. Plus, it's a top-rated brand, over 1 million happy customers, thousands of 5-star reviews, and available in over 30 countries. Recommended by the Today Show, Forbes, New York Magazine, and more. And now, as a special limited time offer for our listeners, get $20 off your purchase of a Skylight Frame when you go to skylightframe.com/NFL. That's SKYLIGHTFRAME.com/NFL. Get $20 off your purchase now at skylightframe.com/NFL. We're back. Our second segment, Locked On Ravens. Kevin Oestreicher still here with Sam Njoku talking Ravens football here on this Friday. No bye week, or we got a bye week for the Ravens. They have their bye week, which means it's a stress-free Sunday, stress-free Monday, and we can just sit back and hope the Ravens are getting everything fixed inside the castle. But Sam, it feels like there's that drama going on in the castle right now. Feels like that's been happening all year with multiple different players. And I think it really has reached a boiling/breaking point with the Ravens suspending Diontae Johnson for one game, conduct detrimental to the team. Obviously, Eric DeCosta released a statement, said that it was for refusal to enter the game against the Eagles. And it's kind of what you trade for Diontae Johnson for, right? It's about, oh, hey, one of your guys goes down. Rashad Bateman leaves with an injury. Oh, hey, Diontae, we need you. Let's go get this thing. And Diontae goes, I'm good. I'm good. You got it. You got it. And again, we don't know the entire situation, but whenever you hear or you see the words, guy doesn't enter the game, refusal to enter the game, there's really no excuse for that, regardless of the situation. I'm not saying it's all on Deontay Johnson. The usage has been weird, but it's on you as a guy on the roster to, when your number is called, go in there and help your team out. And it just feels like for a locker room that hasn't felt fully together this season, this makes it feel like it is very splintered at the moment. Yeah, and
I'm trying my best to find a good reason why anyone would defend what Deontay Johnson did, and I can't, for the life of me, I can't think of one single reason. I think, you can point to perhaps the usage being an issue the last few games he's been with the Ravens, but this is an opportunity to show the coaches and the fans, okay, now you need to put me out there. This is the reason why you brought me here. And he refused. He flat out decided not to get into the game. And I just, for the life of me, don't understand why. We're supposed to use your previous seasons as a receiver to just give you the opportunities. I mean, this is the offense that was top before you came in to the game. So before you were a Raven. So you have to earn your keep. So that's through practice. That's through game action. And he's been targeted sometimes, maybe not enough. He's only had 35 snaps and 5 targets. And he has only completed, I think, 1 of those catches, or maybe 2. I just don't see the reasoning behind not doing so. Now, obviously, he's in his feelings. That's why he didn't go in the game. He figured, okay, you need me now, but you didn't use me prior. So I get his mental aspect with it, but it was foolish, and the Ravens don't play that. This is not the Panthers. This is not the Browns or any other team. This is the top-notch organization. They'll play this game with or without you. We've seen it with Marcus Williams. We've seen it with Eddie Jackson. This is another player that's come in the fire recently, and I just don't know where the Ravens go from here. It'll be up to the Ravens players to think, and maybe even the receivers coach to get in this guy's head and realize, hey, you have an opportunity here that you didn't have with the Panthers, and that's to potentially win a championship. Get it together. And the other 31 teams are watching. They're not blind to this. The other GMs are listening in. They're watching what he's doing. So he may be fighting for a contract and thinking that stats are important, but locker room acumen is even more so important, at least for the top teams in the league. So I don't know. It wasn't a good look for me. I didn't think it was a good decision on his part. And it was noticed during the game that he wasn't out there. I'm sure fans on social media while watching the game were talking about it. But from a fan perspective, watching the game, we saw the drop off in talent once Rashad Bateman left. We saw the offense start to skid a little bit. And we were wondering where Deontay Johnson was. Now we know he decided not to show up, which is insane in today's league.
And again, that's what you trade for him for, is like, hey, Ravens could really use a depth wide receiver. If one of these guys were to go down, you feel more confident with Deontay's on the field product that he brings to the table, as opposed to a Nelson Aguilar or maybe a Tylan Wallace. And Tylan's deserved more snaps, I feel like. I don't think that's, out of the question. I think Tylan's earned that opportunity. Nelson Aguilar has had, hasn't been as consistent as last year. And I think that people have he had such a good year last year that people had, I think, sky high expectations. And obviously I think he's kind of gone back down to average Nelson Aguilar. And I think it's been disappointing for a lot of people. But Deontay essentially is your third best wide receiver on the roster. And now you're kind of back to square one of like, yeah, Sam, you're right. What do you do? Because what I've been kind of saying the past day or so is, after the suspension, do you just kind of say, okay, here's 40% of the offensive snaps. Like, congratulations, you're holding out work. Like, here you go. Here's the role he asked for. I mean, do you reward him for that? They might not have a choice because they need him in a way. But if you let him go, does he latch on with a Kansas City or a Buffalo, or does he go back to Pittsburgh? That'd be crazy if that happened. But like, what happens if you let him go? Does he go and get claimed or signed with somebody that could maybe see the Ravens down the road in the playoffs? And now we're, little things here and there are trickling out about the situation. And Jess Rebeck, who does great work, and he kind of detailed a little bit about what this growing frustration has looked like. And Jeff said, Johnson's growing frustration with his lack of involvement in Baltimore's offense had become palpable in recent weeks. He's been emotional after games, so much so that Jackson has spent significant time with Johnson in his locker, talking things through and trying to calm the emotional wide receiver down. Things reached a boiling point during Sunday's loss to the Eagles after Johnson didn't get on the field early in the game. The Ravens officially ruled out starting wide receiver Rashad Bateman early out in the third quarter because of a knee injury, and Johnson declined numerous requests to play. So that situation, I know that people were talking about maybe when did this happen? Was this like the garbage time drive and the Ravens were like, okay, we're not using you, but now in garbage time, go in there. And Deontay's like, I don't really like the way that this is going. We're not going to do that. But now it's looking like, okay, maybe it was right when Rashad Bateman went down, and Jeff kind of echoed it because they needed him when Rashad went down. I mean, obviously Tylen gets more work and he's earned that, but they needed Deontay Johnson in that situation. And there have been other reports that have come out saying that, you know, he's looked like the Ravens have lost games when they've won because he's been so frustrated. And there was a thing earlier last month when he subtweeted the team, it looked like. I mean, Sam, this is a guy who hasn't even been there for 2 months and we're already dealing with all this craziness. Like, this is just, it's so different from what we're used to from this Ravens organization with all the drama this season. You bring in somebody who has the history from Pittsburgh and from Carolina. Obviously, Baltimore had hope it could go different, but obviously right now it is quite the opposite of that.
Yeah, and this brings it back to early during the Lamar Jackson, Greg Roman days when John Harbaugh said, hey, we want guys who want to be a Raven. If you want stats, go somewhere else. So, and the Ravens took a shot. I mean, they didn't spend much to acquire him, so no harm, no foul, honestly, if this doesn't pan out. But this is why the Ravens are very vigilant in who they decide to bring in. That's why they don't break a sweat when the receiver decides to choose another organization. And it's because some guys want to win and some guys want to get the stats. And it's clear that Deontay Johnson is that guy. Now, I understand the frustration because he came from a Panthers organization where he was receiving a lot of targets. I mean, he was the guy. And he had times in Pittsburgh where he thought that he was the guy. Things didn't really work out that way. So I'm sure he thought going into this organization, Zay Flowers is great, but there's some question marks with Rashad Bateman, at least on the outside, I'm sure, and not much else outside of that as far as name recognition. So I'm assuming Deontay came in here thinking, oh, I'm going to be the guy now. I'm going to be one of the guys alongside Zay Flowers and Mark Andrews to get some targets. That hasn't been the case. He should know that John Harbaugh's not a guy that just gives you something. You have to earn it. Whether or not you agree with that as a Ravens fan remains to be seen, but it's still John Harbaugh's show. And you shouldn't expect a guy to come in, no matter what his previous accolades were, to just come in and be the guy. He has to earn it. And in limited opportunities, he hasn't really shown. He hasn't really shined as bright as we'd had hoped. So it's up to him to decide what he wants to do with this. I'm not very, confident that this goes anywhere but south. But Deontay Johnson could turn a corner and decide, hey, I'm going to be a part of this organization. I'm going to try my best to win a championship, and I'm going to win snaps in practice and not expect something to be handed to me during games.
I think that there are probably almost like 8 or 10 different paths this could go. I think we're still very far from this being officially over because he could come back and have a role in the offense and everything is kind of like, all right, let's just move past it. Or they could just hold him out. It could be a suspension and then essentially a non-suspension through something where it's like, okay, we're just suspending you for a game, but you're not playing the rest of the year. Like, we're just going to hold you. You're going to be inactive for the rest of the season. You're not going anywhere. They could release him. They could release him and say, all right, we don't even want this energy in our locker room. But Mike Tomlin, I think, said it best. I don't remember what it was about, but he said, I can't remember when it was. He goes, we need volunteers, not hostages. And it feels like this is exactly that situation. And John Harbaugh has said almost exactly that, just in different phrases. And you mentioned that, Sam, where it's like, look, if you want to be on a team that, wins football games and has, a good culture and energy, come to Baltimore. If you don't, we'll look forward to facing you on Sunday. And that's essentially what it is with this Deontay Johnson situation. And Jeff actually talked about, he didn't hear anything positive or negative about Deontay Johnson and his practice habits in Baltimore, but he did say that the Athletic Panthers writer said that practicing wasn't his thing in Carolina. And it's just not a good look for anybody. it's just really not obviously you talked about it, Sam, not good for Diontae Johnson because, he's looking for a new team, new contract, and they're going to see this. And plus the other history he has, plus now the Ravens have to deal with this whole blowout situation after already having kind of a tumultuous season. It's been exhausting. That's what I'll say. It's been an exhausting year in multiple ways than one. But again, hopefully the bye week is a good reset. And coming up, we'll talk about some of those bye week agendas, including what the Ravens should do with Justin Tucker. That's been a very popular one. So be sure to stay tuned. A lot to get to on Locked On Ravens. First, the show is brought to you by IceShaker. Hey, Locked On Ravens fans, I know you're like me and your holiday shopping list is, let's just say, far from complete. Well, if that's the case, I've got the perfect gift for the passionate sports fans in your life. Perhaps you've heard of IceShaker. IceShaker is now officially licensed with the NFL, NHL, NBA, NCAA, and MLB and will make the ideal gift. Created by and used by the Gronkowski brothers, IceShakers has sold over 1 million bottles. They have changed the game with workout bottles, and this is the gift you've been looking for. Go to IceShaker.com and use the code LOCKEDONNFL at checkout to save 25% off your order. They have kitchen-grade stainless steel bottles that won't absorb odor like plastic bottles do, and they're third-party tested. They hold ice for 30-plus hours. I know for me, that's a really important thing, is to make sure that the longevity of the ice hold is impeccable. Order to your team branded bottles today at IceShaker.com and use the code LOCKEDONNFL for 25% off your order. IceShakers, show your support for your teams with the best branded workout bottles on the market, IceShakers. And the show is brought to you by FanDuel. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats with live play-by-play and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. Get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bets for the Ravens and Eagles game. Thought the Ravens defense did a pretty good job, but Saquon Barkley still hit his over. So if you did that over on FanDuel, you're probably living large. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more. FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. We're back rounding out Locked On Ravens with Sam Njoku. I am Kevin IceShaker talking Ravens football here. Sam, this team, they're 8-5, already one more loss than they had all of last season, still a month of games left. It's just been a different year. And every year is, honestly, right? I think that last year, everybody thought, oh, this is the year. The roster is there, the coaching staff is there, the vibes are there. Just feels different this year, but that doesn't mean that they can't turn this thing around and solve their problems. But I think the last chance for them to have a real shot to do so is during the bye week, where you can make adjustments and make changes. The big conversation has been with Justin Tucker, and we haven't had a chance to talk about it since the Philly game. Obviously, we've talked about it, you and I, throughout the year, but I think the Philly game was just a new low for Justin Tucker, literally and figuratively. Worst game he's had in his career, 3 misses on kicks. He's missed 10 on the season now, and is hovering right up at just about 70% field goal completion percentage, which is just crazy considering what this guy has done over the course of his career. But there have been a bunch of conversations about, do you bring in competition on the practice squad? Do you just kind of ride it out with him and let him hopefully work through things? I mean, we've been saying that for 3 months and he hasn't been able to work through things. So it feels to me, Sam, like the Ravens are kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place, because at this point in the year, there's really nobody that you can go out there and get where you can confidently say, oh yeah, this guy has the resume and the leg of Justin Tucker. That's just not going to happen. Now, the competition aspect of it, you just bring in a leg to have somebody there. I'm not necessarily opposed to that, but what do you feel like the Ravens should do in this situation?
I think they should keep Justin Tucker. And I will say after the game, I was definitely like, okay, well, there's no way you can keep on doing this with Justin Tucker. But after thinking about it, after looking at the kicks and the misses and the circumstance, you can't get rid of Justin Tucker. He has been, and I mentioned this on my show, he's been the beacon of this team throughout all of the adversity with the Greg Roman offense, with Lamar Jackson's holdout kind of, but just contract negotiations, him figuring out how to be the best quarterback he can be, the injuries, all of that. Justin Tucker has been the mainstay. Maybe it's a little bit sentimental on my part to say that Justin Tucker should be the guy, remain the guy for the remainder of the season, but I don't think this championship run will be as sweet if they do, in fact, win a championship without Justin Tucker. Yes, he's missed kicks. Yes, there's things that he could work on, but I think, and I've heard other pundits agree with this notion, that it's very technical, the issues that he's having. It is a fixable issue. It's not like he doesn't have the leg power. It doesn't like this guy forgot how to kick. So I will ride with Justin Tucker. There are other things, other factors that are at play here in regards to what Justin Tucker's value has been with this team. I think this offense is too good to rely on your kicker. I mean, this isn't 2012. This isn't even 2010. This is 2024. You got Derrick Henry. You got Lamar Jackson. I can list off the weapons all day. You know them. You love them. This offense is too good to rely on 4 kicks by your kicker. A red zone offense that was stellar at the beginning of the season. So this is the offense has to be the one to come in and to kind of take the pressure away from Justin Tucker. Now, easier said than done. You get into the postseason. These tough teams, it's likely going to come down to a kick, right? So you hope that Justin Tucker gets it together. But as you mentioned, the Ravens are within a rock and a hard place with this decision. I still think you stick with Justin Tucker. If you lose the playoff game or lose the championship because Justin Tucker misses it, that's just something that you got to deal with. But I think I'd rather be in the side of giving Justin Tucker the chance to redeem himself. He's done everything he has for this team. Given a shot to redeem himself, I think the Ravens took that approach, and I don't necessarily disagree with it.
Yeah, and I know this is a what have you done for me now lately league, and obviously what Justin Tucker has done this season has not been good. He's cost the Ravens multiple games. But, I mean, I just, if you throw Randy Bullock out there or Riley Patterson, the options are so limited because also other teams have gone through kicking injuries. And, yeah, like the Chiefs have found a couple of solid options for them. But, again, it's like if they bring in a kicker and all of a sudden that guy's not good, it's like, okay, well, you could have just stuck with Justin and see. So it's a difficult situation either way. I think a conversation happens in the offseason regardless of what happens or not. Like, I think that's when this conversation happens, and I've been pretty vocal in saying that throughout the course of the week. Justin has to be the one to figure this out. It feels like it's a mental thing. Like you said, Sam, he hasn't forgotten how to kick. It just feels like he's really in his head about it. You can tell even during his press conferences, he is pretty shaken to the core about what's going on right now, and hopefully he can fix it. But what is your confidence level in this team right now? Obviously, look, Philly's a tough team. It was always going to be a crazy game. You and I talked about that last week. This team is, I think, your record is what it says you are, right? You're an 8-5 football team, but you do have some winnable games down the stretch. Your defense has played a lot better recently, and I think there is reason for optimism, but they just have to figure out how to not beat themselves and how to have these units coexist with one another. So one isn't performing well, and then 2 are, or all 3 of them aren't, or 2 aren't and 1 is. It feels like they're always out of sync with who's playing well and who's not. They can get that clock back together and they can sync that up. They're a dangerous football team.
Yeah, and I'm feeling very confident with this team. I'm not going to lie. I was at the game I mentioned on Sunday, and I am more confident after this loss than I was after the Ravens win against the Bengals on Thursday Night Football. I think the defense has just turned the corner, and they looked stellar. They looked like they were flying to the ball. Now, there are some aspects of this defense now with the move of Kyle Hamilton from that big nickel spot to the high safety that limits what you can do as far as rush defense goes. But that is a knock that you're willing to take. That linebacker core is still good enough to handle the drop-off, the loss of Kyle Hamilton in that area of the defense. Look, after the last 3 weeks, the number 1 pass defense in the league are the Baltimore Ravens. They are the number 1 pass defense in the league since making that switch. Now, they've played Russell Wilson and Jalen Hurts, and they held Jalen Hurts to, I think, under 120 yards passing, which is great considering what Jalen Hurts is able to do with A.J. Brown. So I think the Ravens fan base needs to understand, the loss was pretty devastating considering how the defensive line manhandled the offensive line. But overall, this is the team that is looking to turn a corner. Again, if they can sync up and get things together, if the offense can finally get in the groove and be the dominant offense they were the first part of the season, and the defense continues to do what they're doing, and Justin Tucker finds out how to kick again, they're the best team in the league. I mean, no question about it. So 8-5, they're probably not going to win the 1 seed. They're probably not going to win the 2 seed, but the chance to get in the home playoff game in the wild card round by winning this division is still within their grasp. They're still, in my opinion, the best team in the division. So my confidence is pretty high. I just hope that they use this bye week to fix, fine-tune things, maybe figure something out with the offensive line. I'm not sure they'll make a personnel decision as far as moving the left guard here or there. I think the Ravens are pretty comfortable with their starting 5, but something needs to change a little bit with that protection, especially during games where you're playing these high-octane defensive lines. So other than that, I still think this Ravens offense is stellar. I think this Ravens team is stellar, but they'll go as far as they're willing to. We'll see what happens after the bye week.
Yeah, John Harbaugh essentially said as such they're not going to make any changes along that offensive line. So I'm not expecting that either. But this team, they have it in front of them. I think, Sam, now the mindset for a lot of people is just get into the dance and see what happens. I think that's what it is. Doesn't matter how you do it, just get in, and then it's a whole new season from there. But always appreciate you hopping on, Sam. Thank you for taking some time out of your day. I know you're a busy guy. Tell people where they can find you and what you're working on.
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter X at Ravens Talk Pod. Also find me on YouTube where we post weekly episodes of the Ravens Talk Podcast at Ravens Talk Podcast. You can also find me on Instagram at Ravens Talk Podcast and TikTok on Ravens Talk Podcast. We do live streams sometimes of all 22 for the games that have followed, and also post our regular clips and podcasts on a weekly basis.
Sam knows his stuff. Check out his work. The links will be in the description down below. Sam, appreciate you as always. And thank you to everybody who tuned in to Locked On Ravens today. On the way out, be sure to hit that like and subscribe button in video form, as well as follow along and subscribe in audio form. We'll have some bonus episodes throughout the weekend talking about those bye-week headlines. So be sure to stay tuned for that, and I'll see you right back here soon on Locked On Ravens.